We are up to Daf Chaf Beis Amud Aleph, the two dots, about 10 lines down, where it says Siman Shanbai Shanaz, which is just a way of remembering the upcoming Gemara. We're going back to our Mishnah now, where the Mishnah talked about a fellow who was plowing, and the Mishnah said you could be chayiv 8 different isurim, 8 sets of lashes, just by a simple act of plowing. We're talking about it's on Yantiv, and it's in a cemetery, you're a Kohen, you're a Nazir, you're using a shar, which is hektish, all the case of the Mishnah. Now the Gemara just goes on over here, this entire page. The Gemara is asking, seemingly you could have other isurim over here. In other words, in the act of plowing, why are you saying there's only 8? I could add on some other scenarios. Maskavla Ravoshia asked, V'lechshav nami, why don't we count also? Hazareya benachal esan. You're planting benachal esan. Zareya benachal esan means you're planting. Nachal esan is referring to the valley, which is supposed to be left desolate. We're talking about a egla arufa, where the Torah says if somebody was found, the end of Parsha Shoftim, where the Torah says if somebody found a dead body, we don't know where it came from, we don't know who killed him. So there's a whole process you do, and one of the things is you bring a calf there, you break its neck there, and it says in the Torah you're not allowed to replant that land ever. So the Gemara is asking, Rosh is asking, why can't maybe say a case of the Mishnah where you could be chayiv a 9th iser is if this field happened to be a nachal esan, the desolate land, which is supposed to be from the egla rufa, which is not supposed to be replanted. That's his question. And where's the warning? Where do you know you get Makkot from that? Mehalcha, from here it says, quote, Asher lo ye'avid bo, it says you should not work it, v'lo yisarei, you shouldn't plant it. So again, we're going to see every one of these Amoraim asks, maybe it's, why don't you throw in this Isser also, and then brings a source that you know that you get Malchus for that, such a thing. Maskavla Rechanina asked the question, V'lechshav nami, why don't you count also, Hamochik es Hashem b'halichaso, if you're erasing Hashem's name while you are walking and plowing. Let's say Hashem's name is you wrote Hashem's name underneath the plow, and as you're plowing, you're erasing it. So that could be another case where you could be chayiv, just for the act of plowing, you could be chayiv another Isser. Where's the source for that? Va'azharte, and the warning in the Torah is mehacha, from here it says, quote, V'ibaditem es shemam min hamakamahu, it says you should destroy the avodah zarah. Lo sasun kein l'Hashem l'kechem. You're not supposed to do that to Hashem. You're supposed to destroy avodah zarah. You're not supposed to destroy Hashem's name. So if one erases Hashem's name, that's an isser in the Torah based on this pasuk. Maskal Ravo, and again, there's no answer to these questions. The Gemara just keeps asking, why don't you count this? Why don't you count that? Okay. Maskal Ravo asks, V'lechshav nami, why don't you count also? Hakotzes es baherto. The person has a form of tsaras, and somehow as he's plowing, he has a contraption where while he's plowing, it's going to take off that piece of tsaras from him. Vazharte mehacha, where's the source for that? It says, quote, Hishamer b'nega tsaras. It says you should watch the nega tsaras, and we know anywhere, the Gemara before said, Gemara on Daf Yud Gimel, anywhere where it says the word Hishamer, it means a negative commandment. So you'll get Malchus for that. Maskefla Abaye asked, V'lechshav nami, why don't you count also? If you remove the choshen from the ephod is like the apron of the Kohen Gadol, the choshen is the breastplate. The Torah said you're not allowed to remove it. So maybe in the course of the plowing he removed it. Also, v'hameser bade aron, or if he took out the poles of the aron in the base of Mikdash, right? So maybe somehow he had attached to this plow while he's plowing, the poles came out. You should get another set of lashes for that. Vazharte mehacha, and the isser in the Torah, the warning in the Torah for that is, it says, quote, lo yasuru, it says you should not remove the poles of the aron, and also, quote, v'lo yizach hachoshen, you should not remove the breastplate. Maskal Rashi asked, v'lechshav nami, why don't you count also, hachorish ba'atzei asherah, why don't you count that you're plowing with atzei asherah, wood of an avodah zarah tree? Vazharte mehacha, and the isser is, it says, quote, V'lo yidabik b'yadchem uma. You shouldn't take anything from it. You're not allowed to get any hana, any benefit from an avodah zarah tree. So if he made his plow from the wood of an atzei asherah, that's another set of malchus. Maskav Ravina asked, V'lechshav nami, why don't you count also hakotzes ilanas tovas? If you cut down good trees, meaning trees that have fruit on it. There's an Isser in the Torah. Maybe while you're plowing, you're cutting down a tree like that. Vazharte mehacha, and the Isser is from here. It says, quote, Kimi menu tochal, from it you should eat. Va'oso lo tichras, and it you should not cut down. Another Isser. Amle Rav Zera le Rav Mani, v'lech shavnami, why don't you count also? Kigon de Amar, if a guy said, Shvua shlo echrosh biyantiv. If a guy said, I swear I will not plow on Yantiv. So here the Gemara is asking an interesting question. Maybe the case of the Mishnah is, I can find you another Isser in the Torah, another set of lashes, where a guy said, I make an oath, he takes a shvua, and he says, I will not plow on Yantiv. Now we know there's an Isser in the Torah that you're not allowed to nullify your vows, you're not allowed to break your vows, you're allowed to nullify them, but you're not allowed, if you made a shavua, you're not allowed to break it. If you say, I swear I'm not going to sit on this chair, so if you sit on that chair, you're going to get malchus. So if a guy says, I swear I'm not going to plow on Yantiv, so besides the fact that you're desecrating Yantiv, you're also transgressing your oath, and you should get malchus for that. The Gemara answers, Hasam, over there, lo kachala shvua. The shvua does not take effect. If you take an oath that you're not going to plow on Yantiv, it's not going to take effect. Why? Mushbe ve'omed mihar Sinaihu. You are already sworn, you're sworn and standing from Har Sinai. What does that mean? This is a common theme throughout Masechta Shavuos, where basically the Gemara says that when Klal Yisrael was standing at Har Sinai, we all were under oath to accept everything in the Torah. So everything in the Torah, we have an oath that we're going to keep. It's part of the reason why a person cannot transgress anything in the Torah. Our neshamas all were there at Har Sinai, and we all took this oath. Now, we also have a rule that a shavua is not chal on another shvua. One shvua cannot fall on another shvua. So, for example, if I say I'm not going to sit on this chair, and then I took an oath, then I took another oath, I will not sit on this chair, the second one doesn't work, because it's already prohibited to you to sit on the chair because of your first oath. So your second oath doesn't take effect. So, based on this, similarly, if you make a shavua, you take an oath not to transgress something in the Torah, that oath never doesn't take effect, because you already swore on it when you were standing there at Har Sinai. You're mushpeh v'omin me'Har Sinai. You already swore on this thing. So if a guy says, I swear I'm not going to plow on Yantiv, that's an irrelevant thing to say. And even if you break that, you didn't break an oath, because you broke that. You already swore. You're mechuyev to do it. You're obligated to not plow on Yantiv because of the Torah. So your oath doesn't add anything to it. It doesn't contract. It doesn't do anything. It doesn't add. It doesn't take away. And your oath has no bearing. Your oath didn't take effect. It's like saying nothing, because it's utterly worthless, the oath, because you already took an oath on it. So the Gemara is saying is, again, the question was, maybe I should get malchus for transgressing my oath, which is an Isser in Torah, to transgress your oath. The answer is, this oath never took effect, because you already swore on Har Sinai that you're not going to plow on Yantiv, because that's an Isser in the Torah. Amr Lei, so he said back again, let's read that again. Hasam over there, lo kachal, doesn't take effect. Lo kachal shvua, the shvua does not take effect, because mushba ve'omin me'Har Sinai, you already swore on such a thing from Har Sinai. It's an Isser in the Torah. So a person says, I swear I'm not going to eat pig. That doesn't take effect. And if you eat the pig, you'll get lashes for eating pig, but you're not going to get lashes for breaking your oath, because the oath didn't work. Amr Lei, so he said back to him, Kigon da Amr shvua shlo echrosh bein b'chol bein b'yantiv. What about if a guy said, I swear I'm not going to plow ever? Now, if a guy says, I'm not going to plow ever, the guy takes an oath and says, I will never plow. So then, we have a rule, as the Gemara says, demigu, that since the chala alei shvua b'chol, since the oath takes effect during the week, chala alei nami b'yantiv, it also takes effect on yantiv. Which means, if your oath was solely on something that's asur in the Torah, then your oath has no bearing, it didn't work, and it's irrelevant. But if you took an oath on something permitted and something prohibited, just like your oath, half your oath took effect, so it will take effect on the other half also, which was already prohibited. So for example, if a person says, I'm not going to eat any meat whatsoever, ever. Now again, let's back up. If a person says, I'm not going to eat I'm not going to eat pork. A person takes an oath, he's not going to eat pork. That shvua is irrelevant. He won't get malchus for that, the shvuah never took effect because, right, that's an issur in the Torah. What if a person says, I take an oath that I'm not going to ever eat meat? Now, eating meat includes kosher meat and not kosher meat. Since the shvuah works in regards to kosher meat, it will also work in regards to the not kosher meat. And therefore, if a person actually eats a piece of pig, he'll be chayav one for eating pig and one for transgressing his oath, because the oath takes effect. If the oath is able to take effect on mutter stuff, since the oath takes effect, therefore it works even for something that was prohibited also. So the Gemara is asking, in our case also, this is what we call issur kolo. Issur kolo means if the issur could include other stuff which was already mutter, if your oath could include stuff which was already mutter, it could include something that's asur also. Now, as we usually have the rule that an oath can't go on top of another oath, or anything that's asur in the Torah, it can't go on top of it, because it's already prohibited. But if it's going on something else, it's kolo, it includes other stuff which is permitted. Since it's going on other stuff, it can also go on this. So the Gemara's question is now, why don't you include the case of where a guy took an oath that he's not going to plow during the week or on Yontif? And since it's chal during the week, it's also chal. Since it takes effect on the part of not plowing during the week, it also takes effect on not plowing on Yontif. That's the Gemara's question. Again, if we could read that inside again, the Gemara says, Amalek, you go into Amar Shvuah, the first wide line. Shavua shlo echrosh bein b'chol bein b'yontif. If a guy says, I'm taking an oath I won't plow, not during the week and not on Yontif. The migu, that since the chal le shvuah b'chol, since it's able to take hold during the week, chal le nam b'yontif, it's also chal on Yontif. So why is that not listed in the Mishnah? So the Gemara answers, midi the isa b'sheila. Midi means a thing. The isa, that it is b'sheila, which you could ask on it and you could uproot it. Lo ktani, we didn't teach. In other words, anything which you're able to uproot just by asking. You could go to a Rav and you could do something called hataras nedarim, and the Rav could uproot your shavua. He could say, maybe you didn't realize what you were doing with the oath, whatever it is. So something which you could uproot, the Mishnah is not listing. So that's why the Mishnah doesn't say the case of the oath, because a shavua is something that you could always go to a Rav and you could say, I didn't realize what I was doing when I made the oath. You could do she'ela. She'ela means you could ask on it and you could uproot it, and it's like the oath never happened. So that's why the Mishnah didn't say it. To which Gemara said, "V'lo, no. You're telling me the Mishnah doesn't say anything that could be uprooted just by asking a Rav? V'harei hektish." But one of the first cases was we were talking about hektish. Hektish is, how does something become hektish seemingly? Where I say this thing, this animal belongs to the Beis Hamikdash. Well, that's basically like making a promise, a neder, and that's also something you could ask on. So Gemara is asking, why are you telling me the Mishnah doesn't say things you could uproot? It does. It says the case of hektish. The Gemara answers, b'bechar. The case of the Mishnah is talking about hektish, is talking about a bechar, it's talking about a firstborn animal, which is automatically hektish. That's not something you could uproot. If I take a regular mundane animal and I say, this is hektish, so that's a neder, and that's something you could go to a Rav and you could maybe have it uprooted. But an animal that was hektish because of birth, it was the firstborn, there's no way you could uproot that. So the Gemara is saying, I'm sticking to what I'm saying, that the Mishnah doesn't say anything that deals with she'ila, anything you could ask on and uproot it, the Mishnah doesn't say. To which the Gemara asks, what do you mean? V'hari nazir. But the Mishnah says a case of a nazir. Right? A nazir is basically like a neder, where a guy made a promise that he's going to become a nazir. Now, seemingly, a nazir also could uproot it. He could just go to the Rav and say, I didn't realize what I was doing, I was under duress, whatever it was, and therefore he could ask a Rav to nullify his neder, or his nazirus. So Gemara is asking, so we are saying things that have to do with sheila. The Gemara answers, bin nazir shimshon. We're talking about a special type of nazirus. It's called nazir shimshon. Shimshon was the ultimate nazir. And a nazir of shimshon you can't ask on. You can't uproot with sheila. To which the Gemara asks, so notice, the Gemara is answering the case of the Mishnah that talks about a nazir, is talking about this guy was a nazir shimshon, which is a special type of nazirus, and that nazirus you're not allowed to uproot. The Gemara says, nazir shimshon barat tmula mesimhu. But the funny thing is that a nazir shimshon, even though it has a stringency on one hand, the other hand, the halacha is that he's allowed to become tameh to dead people. The whole point of the Mishnah, why we said a nazir, is because you're in a cemetery. If it's a Nazir Shimshon, then it's not usher to become Tameh to people. To which the Gemara says, you're right. Back to the beginning, which is, back to the question, why didn't we say a case of where the guy took an oath that he's not going to plow, not during the week, and not on Yontif? So we tried answering because it doesn't say things which you could ask on. But the Gemara is asking, what do you mean? But it says Nazir. Nazir is something you could ask on. And don't tell me he's talking about Nazir Shimshon, because a Nazir Shimshon is able to become Tameh to dead people. The Gemara says, Ella, rather, Hai Tana Isser Kolel Lesle. This Tana does not hold of Isser Kolel. Again, Isser Kolel means something that's including other stuff. Remember, we said the only way that this oath could take effect on Yontif is if you say, well, since it takes effect during the week, it also could include also on Yontif. This Tana doesn't hold like that. He holds an Isser Kolel, an Isser which includes other stuff, does not take effect on this thing. And therefore, if you make an oath that you're not going to plow on Yontif or during the week, so it could be during the week you're not allowed to plow, but on Yontif, the oath did not take effect. It would only take effect if you hold Isser Kolel works, and this Tana does not hold of Isser Kolel. Good, now we have a new thing. Amr of Hoshia, Hamrabia sharp Sule Miktashim. If one mates a sharp Sule HaMiktashim with another one, Loka he shnaim, he gets malchus, 2 sets of malchus. The other Rishonim take out the word shnaim, they don't have the girsa, but you get malchus. What is a sharp psula miktashim? A shar is an axe. Psula miktashim means an animal which was a carbon. It was set aside for a carbon. And then what happened was it got a mum, it got a blemish. So regular animal, I have an ox which I say I want to bring it as a carbon. It is now belongs to the base of mikdash, it's hektish. Now, you would bring that as a carbon to the mizbech, on the mizbech. If it gets a blemish, you no longer could bring it as a carbon. So now, what's the halacha? This is what we call a sharp psule hamiktashim. It became possible for the base of mikdash. What's the halacha status of this animal? So it's a funny thing. This animal, it has a little bit of 2 things over here. First of all, when you actually shecht it, you're allowed to eat it. So in other words, so in that aspect, it lost its hektish, that I could eat it outside I'm not allowed to shecht in the base of mikdash, but I could eat it outside the base of mikdash. You shecht it and you can eat it. So it sort of lost its hektish status. On the other hand, before you shecht it, you're not allowed to work it. There are certain halachas. You're not allowed to use the sharings of it. Right? If you share the animal, you cut off all its wool. You're not allowed to use it. You're not allowed to work it. So it's, on one hand, it's kodesh, and on the other hand, it's chol. You see the funny situation over here. Right? We treat it like it's still a carbon on the fact that you can't work it. On the other hand, we treat it like it's a regular mundane animal because I could shecht it outside the base of mikdash and eat it. So now, what Rav Hoshia is saying is a tremendous chiddush. Since we treat it like kodesh and chol, if you mate 2 of these animals with each other, each animal has a kodesh aspect and a chol aspect, a holy aspect and a mundane aspect to it. When you mate them together, you're mating like 2 different animals together. You're breeding 2 different animals. We know you're not allowed to breed 2 different animals. You can't breed a horse and a cow together. That's an issur in the Torah. So by putting a sharp psule miktashim with another sharp psule miktashim, you're mixing kodesh and chol. And putting kodesh and chol together is like breeding 2 different species, and that is usur in the Torah. That's Rav Hoshia's chiddush. Hamarbia sharp psule miktashim. If you mate a sharp psule miktashim, even with another one, loka, you're going to get malchus. That's how Rashi explains the Gemara, because chulin and kachim are like 2 different species. If I have a regular animal and a kodesh animal, to put them together, that's called grafting 2 different animals together. Amr Yitzchak hamanig b'sharp psul miktashim. If you lead a sharp psul miktashim, you lead him. He's leading your carriage. Loka, you're going to get malchus. Why do I get malchus? 1 animal. We know you're not allowed to lead a carriage from 2 different animals with an ox and a donkey. Right? You're not allowed to lead a plow with an ox and a donkey because they're 2 different species. So Rabbi Yitzchak is adding on to the chiddush of Rav Hoshia, and he's saying, so if you have a sharp psule miktashim, which you just told me is a mixture of kodesh and chol, which are like 2 different things. So if I attach my carriage to 1 animal who's a sharp psule miktashim, you get malchus. Shahare guf echadhu, because it's 1 body. V'asu akasiv kishnei gufim, and the Torah considers it asa akasiv. The Torah makes it kishnei gufim. It's treated like two separate animals. So it's a funny thing. You're going to have this one animal, and he's just leading you. Hitch him up to your carriage or to your plow. If he's walking, it's like I'm using two animals, two different species to lead my carriage. It's Kodesh and Chol, and therefore you're going to get Malkus for that. That's his Chiddush. Good. The next Mishnah over here, we are now entering a new phase of the Masechta, which is, we've been learning long enough throughout the third parak, all the Chiyuv Malkus. Every time you get Malkus, if you transgress the negative commandment, the Mishnah is finally going to tell us how you get Malkus. And the next couple of Mishnayos are going to discuss that. So first of all, the Mishnah says, Kama Malkunaso, how many Malkus do you get? Every time we talk about Malkus, how many do you get? Arbayim Chasar Achas. 40 minus 1, which is 39. Shenemar, quote, B'mispar ha'arbayim. End quote. The Pasuk says, if you look at the Pasuk, it says, V'kol lefanav k'dei rishaso b'mispar arbayim yakenu. Right? It says b'mispar, and then it says arbayim yakenu. You should hit him 40 times. But it says mispar, the end of the pasuk before, arbayim. And we learn from there, minyan shu samach l'arbayim. It means the count which is next to 40. Because the Gemara explains, you should give him the mispar, give him the number which the number after that will lead you to 40. It's a drasha of the Rabbanan. The Rabbanan learned this out. So the Torah is not saying give him 40. The Torah is saying give him a number which will lead you to 40, which is 39. So you only get 39 lashes. Rabbi Yehuda Omer Arbaim Shleimus Uloka. Rabbi Yehuda disagrees. He says no. Pshat in the pasuk is Pashup Pshat. It says Arbaim Yakenu. You give him 40 lashes. Vehechanu Uloka says now. That's Rabbi Yehuda. So Rabbi Yehuda says you get 40. Now we know the Gemara the Mishnah is hinting to. The Mishnah later says all the malchus that we give are 39 because every 3 lashes are considered one. In other words, what you do is you hit the guy one hitting, which has 3 parts to it. 1 goes on his stomach and then 2 on his back. But it's always supposed. That's why 39 is divisible by 3 because 1 malka is really 3 malchus. Now the Gemara says according to Rabbi Yehuda that there's 40. So where's that extra one? Because all the 39 can be broken up into groups of 3. Vehechanu lokes yisera. Where do you give him the extra one? Being safe of in between his shoulders and the back, between his shoulders. Good. Now the Mishnah has a new thing. Ein omdin aso el b'makas ruis lishtalish. When they evaluate the fellow, they only evaluate him for makas which is fitting to be in thirds, as we just said, because every lash contains 3 parts to it. 1 in the stomach, 2 in the back. So when they evaluate, they would have a doctor come in and evaluate the fellow if he's able to handle lashes. So if the guy is only able to handle 18, they'll only give him 18. If he can only handle 21, they'll give him 21. The chiddush of the Mishnah is that you don't evaluate 22 or 23. It has to be divisible by 3, because again, the malchus is a set of 3. Every set of malchus is a set of 3. So therefore, when the doctor looks at him, he has to evaluate it, a number which is divisible by 3. In omniso b'makas rois lishtalish, a makkah which is able to be split into 3. Now, Mishnah has a new thing. Amdua lekaba arbayim. If let's say they evaluated him, he could accept 40, which means 39 probably. The loka mixas, and he got some. So at first they looked at this guy and they said he's a healthy guy. He could handle 39 lashes, and they started giving him lashes. V'amdu she'ein yachol lekaba arbayim. And then they looked at him after 18. They looked at this guy and said he can't handle anymore. Pater, he is pater. He's pater from the rest. The reason is he already got some, right? So at first we thought he could handle 40. He already got 18. After 18, we see he cannot handle more. He is off the hook. He already got some lashes. He's off the hook. Amdua lekabel shmon esrei. Let's say they evaluate him. He could only handle 18. Umi shalaka. And once they hit him, amdu, they evaluated. Shiyachol lekabel arbayim. Here the opposite. They see, okay, we thought he could only handle 18, but he's doing pretty good. Maybe he can handle 40. Pater, he is pater. Once you evaluate him one time, and he already received that first evaluation, and he got that amount, you don't have to reevaluate him and add on more, and then the guy is off the hook. So good. So basically what we had over here was, we had a bunch of questions on the Mishnah first. The Gemara's questions were In the Mishnah, going back to the last Mishnah on Chaf Alef and Beis, why don't you count other Isurim? One of them was planting in the Nachal Esan, in the desolate valley, right? It's not supposed to plant there. We had, why don't you count also erasing Hashem's name? Why don't you count cutting off your tzaras? Why don't you count removing the breastplate, removing the aron, removing the post from the aron? Why don't you count plowing with Atzei Asherah, Avodah Zarah tree? Why don't you count cutting off good trees? There doesn't seem to be a good answer to all these things. Then we had the question, why don't you count, the guy made an oath that he's not going to plow on Yontif. The Gemara says that the oath doesn't take effect. So the Gemara says, why don't you count, a guy says, I'm not going to, he takes an oath, I won't plow on Yontif or during the Chol. That ultimately, the Gemara's answer is because this Tana does not hold of Isser Kolo. And then we saw the end of that Gemara, the Chiddush was that a sharp Sule Mikdashim is like a hybrid of Kodesh and Chol. And therefore, if you breed them together, you'll get Malkus. And if you lead a carriage with it, you'll also get Malkus. And then we have this Mishnah, which is, the Mishnah is telling us, Malkus is really, you give 39 lashes, not 40. Rabbi Yehuda argues, he says 40. And then we have, the extra one is between the shoulders. And then we have, if somebody got, also you only evaluate, when they evaluate the fellow, it's divisible by 3. And then we had, if a guy was evaluated for 40, and after 18 he can't handle anymore, he's pater, he does not need anymore. And similarly, vice versa, which is, if he evaluated for 18, and then he got 18, and you see he could handle more, you do not have to give him more. That's the end of the Mishnah. And then we'll see the Gemara will discuss all this.